All right, today we're diving into a really dramatic life story, one filled with love, heartbreak, and a pretty shocking fall from grace. We're going to try and figure out why it all happened, but we're using a couple of really fascinating, ancient tools to do it, systems that claim they can map out your destiny right from the moment you're born.
So this really gets to the heart of it, right? This is the central question our source material asks. It frames a personal tragedy almost like a cosmic mystery. What forces, internal or maybe external, could send someone's life spinning from, total stability into complete chaos?
All right, let's open the case file. The person at the center of this is a woman named Ding Xiaoyu, and her story is basically the perfect case study for these ancient analytical methods. So who is Ding Xiaoyu? Let's get a quick picture. She's a Gemini, born back in 1974, described as slender, fair-skinned with these big, expressive eyes. But it's her personality that really jumps off the page. We're talking bold, passionate, someone who isn't afraid to love or hate. And her motto? What I want, I will fight for. So you already get a sense of her intensity.
Okay, section 1. So before we jump into any of the cosmic stuff, we really need to get the timeline straight. We need to understand the story of what actually happened in her life.
Her life starts out pretty normal, totally stable. In her early 20s, she's a travel agent, living at home, being the good daughter. But then, things start to take a turn. Between 23 and 27, she gets into a serious relationship that just ends in heartbreak. Then, at 27, a one-night stand with a married guy spirals into this tumultuous, destructive affair. That very same year, it all implodes so badly that she attempts suicide. And by 28, she makes a massive career change. She gets into the world of Red Envelope Clubs, think Hostess clubs, and the source is clear, she did it for the money.
So you have to ask, right, how does someone's life just pivot so hard, so fast? This is where our source material gets really fascinating. It steps away from all the usual explanations and starts looking for answers in a place you might not expect.
The explanation comes from these two really ancient analytical tools, Bazi, which you might know as the Four Pillars of Destiny, and Ziwei Doushu, or Purple Star Astrology. Just think of them as two totally different lenses we can use to look at the very same story.
All right, let's get into our first tool, Section 2, the Bazi Blueprint. Bazi is often called a person's cosmic birth certificate. It's basically a snapshot of all the cosmic energies that were in the air at the exact moment you were born. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This looks super complicated, right? You've got these 4 pillars for the year, month, day, and hour of her birth, each with its own elements. To a real master, this whole grid is a life story. But for what we're talking about today, we're just going to zero in on one key part, the part that has to do with her relationships. And the source material doesn't mess around. It asks a really blunt question. Why did she end up as the other woman? And why was she the one who ultimately lost? It's not just describing her personality. It's trying to use this chart to explain this really specific, painful outcome. So here's the Bazi explanation. It's almost like a cosmic tug-of-war. In her chart, there's an element called the husband star, which is exactly what it sounds like. It represents her partner. But right there with it is a rival star, representing another woman. According to this analysis, their specific placement in her chart means the rival star is basically destined to combine with and, well, steal away her husband star. It creates this built-in pattern where she's always at a disadvantage in a love triangle. But wait, there's more. It's not just that one dynamic. The source also points out that her chart has something called multiple unions, which is basically a huge signpost for a life that's going to be full of complex, messy, emotional entanglements. We're not just talking about one difficult relationship. Okay, so that's the Bazi blueprint. Now let's switch gears to our second tool and see what it has to say. Section 3. The Purple Star Map. So, if Bazi is like an elemental blueprint, Ziwei Daoshu is more like a super detailed celestial map. It plots out all these symbolic stars across 12 different palaces, which just represent different areas of your life. So Bazi gave us one version of the story. What does this celestial map tell us? What's the recipe for her chaotic love life according to this system? The source lays this out almost like a recipe for romantic chaos. It's pretty wild. Step 1, in her main life palace, which is like her core identity, you start with 2 very powerful stars, Pojun, which translates to the breaker, and Lian Zhen, or the flirt. Step 2, you add a heavy dose of what are called peach blossom stars in another part of her chart. And what do you get when you mix all that together?
A powerful attraction to people, for sure, but relationships that are just destined to be intense, messy, and, well, not last very long.
Okay, let's zoom in on that first star, Pojun, the breaker, because this one is a big deal. The source calls it a star of depletion or consumption, but the analogy they use is perfect. Think of a beautiful, calm ocean. That's one side of Pojun. But then the weather turns. That same beautiful ocean can create these massive, destructive waves that can just swallow anything. That's the kind of volatility we're talking about in her personality.
And then you've got the peach blossom stars. You can basically think of these as a charisma amplifier. They turn up the volume on your charm and eloquence. They're a catalyst for romance. But the source says having too many of them, which she does, leads to constant romantic drama and complicated situations. And the source is incredibly blunt about what this means. It says this specific combination makes something like a one-night stand as easy as turning one's hand. Pretty direct, huh?
Okay, so we've looked at the Bazi blueprint. We've looked at the purple star map. What happens when we put these two completely different analyses side by side? This is where we get to the big question. Fate versus free will.
Okay, look at this. This is where it gets really, really interesting. On the left, you have the Bazi blueprint telling a story about a rival star and multiple unions. On the right, you have the purple star map with its breaker and flirt stars, all amplified by those peach blossom stars. I mean, look at the parallels here. Two systems with totally different methods and symbols are telling the exact same story. A story of instability, rivalry, and relationships that burn bright and then burn out fast.
So the really striking thing here is the convergence, right? You have two totally separate ancient systems, and somehow they both point to the exact same conclusion. A strong-willed, passionate woman whose life path was just predisposed to romantic challenges and instability.
But this is where we have to be careful, because it brings up that huge question of free will. The source makes a really crucial point here. This kind of analysis isn't meant to predict an inescapable future. It's not about saying this will happen to you. It's about looking back and explaining the inherent patterns that may have led things to happen the way they did. So it's not about fortune telling, it's about pattern recognition.
And that leaves us with the big, final question. The one that kind of sticks with you, you know? Are these star charts a genuine map of our destiny? A pre-written script we're all just acting out? Or are they something else? Are they maybe just a really sophisticated mirror? One that simply reflects back the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of it all? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me for this one.